Hello, everybody. We're live. I'm just going to give us all a few minutes so that everybody gets time to join, and then we'll start. This is actually our second Zoom event, and we're very excited to have Alexandra Shulman and Natasha Kaplinsky with us today. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's okay. It's what's it like where you are? Is it nice? Is it rainy? Is it bad weather?
In Sussex, it's very blustery, and we've got two small children at home. And if you'd caught me earlier on, I was running around the garden trying to pin down a trampoline that had just kind of blown over. So I'm slightly windswept, but yeah, it's a little bit brighter now.
And here in London, it's torrential downpours and then sort of blazing sun. So it's very disconcerting. You don't know what to do with yourself.
The last time we met, actually, Alexandra, I admitted to you that I had spent hours trying to work out what to wear in my wardrobe. You were still at Vogue. I have to say, I felt slightly more relaxed today.
Oh, we've got somebody else who's just joined us.
Yeah, that's okay. I think that we will start. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what is our second live webinar. And I'd also like to thank Alexandra and Natasha for being our guests today. Neither need any introduction. Alexandra was Vogue's editor for 25 years. What a fabulous accolade that was. And is now writing for The Mail on Sunday, others, and is an author, which is why we're here today. I would like to say that we are putting up links for Alexandra's book on our chat section, so please do go there. And Natasha is one of our best loved broadcasters, presented on many news programs and others across all the channels. And dare I say it, Natasha also was the very first, Strictly winner. So I know that we're very keen to hear them talk, but before we do, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Wellbeing of Women. We are the only women's health research charity in the UK, and we cover all aspects of women's reproductive health. So everything from fertility issues, pregnancy and birth complications, all the gynecological cancers, and then well-being issues that tend to get rather belittled and perhaps they're taboo subjects still, things like menopause, very heavy bleeding, incontinence. And our research leads to lots and lots of things that many of you here today will already have benefited from. So ultrasound in pregnancy, folic acid supplements came from our work. And actually it was our researchers who found the link between HPV and cervical cancer. And that's led to the HPV vaccine, which anybody who's listening today who is under 28 will have had. And actually it will, we hope, make cervical cancer preventable for the first time in this country. Before the pandemic, we actually had 30 live active research projects up and down the country. A quick snapshot is our centre in Liverpool, looking at personalised treatments for premature birth, and then in Scotland, in Liverpool, in Oxford, in Southampton, London, we are looking at all kinds of different treatments for womb and ovarian cancer, looking at ways of preventing miscarriage and stillbirth, things that really are very traumatic for people when it happens. Now that was before the pandemic. Today, everything is paused, on hold, or people are just working from home because the labs are closed. And a lot of our doctors, nurses, midwives, and scientists are actually back on the front line fighting coronavirus. So what's really important to us is to make sure that they can return to their work, to their vital research, to safeguard the future health of women. That's the future health of all of us. And this is where you come in. Because of coronavirus, our income has literally taken a nosedive. We've got very little money coming in. We get no government or statutory funding, nothing at all, and we won't benefit from any of the government special funding that they're doing during this terrible crisis. So I really need all of you, if you would, to make a donation. I know some people already have. We've put the link up again on chat, or just go onto our website and please make a donation, because this research will benefit you. Thank you. Now I'm going to hand over to Natasha, who is going to be asking, grilling, maybe I should say, Alexandra this afternoon. Thank you for waiting, ladies. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to mute now.
Janet, thank you very much. A very gentle grilling, I might say. May I just say that I do admire you, Janet, and all of your colleagues at Wellbeing for Women, because I've been a supporter of yours for many years, and what you are doing is extraordinary. So thank you very much. Keep up the good work. And I'm so pleased that there is so much support for this webinar today. Alexandra, how wonderful and what a privilege for me to have the opportunity to ask you some questions. And I know that there are questions being fed into this discussion throughout this chat, and I'll endeavour to include as many of those as possible. But thank you very much for your time today. And I guess the first question has got to be, how are you coping with lockdown, and what are you wearing? Because I've had to order a whole load of tracksuits because my wardrobe doesn't suit just sticking at home and just hanging out.
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. Thank you, Wellbeing, for having me, and Natasha for interviewing me. So, well, I think I'm very lucky in terms of this is a horrible time, but I'm as well positioned as can be because I don't have a small child that I'm trying to homeschool. I don't have a full-time job that I'm trying to do from my laptop or bedroom. And we've got a very nice garden here and a park out the front. So, you know, we've got ways of sort of getting out and about. So I'm sort of managing fine in lockdown. The clothes issue is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because everyone's got very different attitudes to this. Like, I absolutely think I have to get dressed and out of those pajamas in the morning. And to be honest, a tracksuit is a kind of, for me, it's a bit of a halfway house. So I did wear one yesterday, or tracksuit bottoms yesterday, but all day long I slightly felt I'm a bit cheating here because, you know, it's not really getting dressed. On the other hand, I do love tracksuits actually, but and wear them quite a lot in normal times. But it's in these times I feel more kind of compelled to have to kind of, you know, put on a show, stiff upper lip, sort of clothes-wise. So I get dressed, but I mean, I've got tons of friends who are just, you know, in their pajamas or dressing gowns all day long.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? And you talk about tracksuits in your book a lot. In fact, there's a whole chapter on tracksuit.
Oh, yeah.
And also the kind of sloppy Joe jumper that you love. And I've just looked at your Instagram this morning, Alexandra, and that was the latest post from you this morning. But yes, it's a whole different thing. It sets your mood, doesn't it, for the day of what you're wearing. Let's get cracking and just kind of talk about your book, which I found absolutely fascinating and devoured it in the midst of trying to online school our children as well. For those who don't know much, oh yeah, it was the highlight, let me tell you. For those of us that don't know much about your career, you were at Vogue for 25 years, but just when did you leave, and I guess why did you leave?
So I left in 2017, which was 25 years after joining in 1992. And when I say all those numbers, it just seems kind of freakish, really. 25 years in one job is really quite unusual. And 1992 to 2017 is an extraordinary, so much had changed in everyone's lives, and particularly in my life, actually, because I had a child during that period, as many people do. And one of the things that propelled me into leaving was when I realized that in 25 years, I'd given birth to somebody who had become a human, a totally sentient human being. I mean, had learned everything, walk, talk, make friends, educate, you know, everything had changed in this person's life. He'd become a human, and I'd sat at the same desk every day for all that period of time. So when I thought about bottling out of leaving, that was quite a kind of a compelling reason to not. But I left because 25 years was long enough, you know, really. I just thought, if I don't leave now, when will I leave? And I'd had a fantastic 2016, which was Vogue's 100th birthday. And we'd done a great program of events, and it had gone really well. So it was kind of like, okay, now the going is good. Now is the time to go.
Nevertheless, it's such a huge decision, isn't it, to leave such a prominent job where you'd kind of grown up. What's the thing that you miss the most about going into head office?
Oh, good question. I think I miss the chatter, you know, that feeling of there's this big life going on around you, and the kind of office gossip, you know, always loved that. I've always loved, you know, the kind of water cooler element of offices. So I very much miss that. And, but that's really it, actually. I've sort of very much embraced the differences.
I feel like I ought to ask you a couple more questions about your time at Vogue, because actually the book that you've written isn't about Vogue, is it? It's about the life behind it. And that must have been a delicate line to tread, revealing a little bit about your job and the status that you held, but also it's about you, really, the book, isn't it?
Yes, I think anyone expecting a kind of dishing the dirt memoir would be disappointed by this book, because that's not what it is, and it was never going to be. I feel very, very loyal still to the people that I worked with and the things that happened, and I'm not sure I'm a natural expose kind of person. So, but I wanted to write about Vogue because obviously people are interested, and it had been such a huge part of my life. So I tried to find a way that I could write about what it was like to be sort of every woman in a way, and the strange kind of moments when it clashes, when, you know, there you are, you're editor of Vogue, it's very, very glamorous in many ways, you're dealing with the fashion industry, celebrities, clothes and everything, and then, you know, you go out in the morning on your way to meet Ralph Lauren at Claridge's, and you trip over the recycling caddy and all over your Manolo Blahnik, so, you know, carrot peels and everything. So it's that quality that in a way I wanted to write about, and the way I found to do it was to go through different items of clothes.
Indeed, and it, you know, your life did seem impossibly glamorous, which we can touch on a bit later on. But you're right, the chapters are divided, aren't they? Starting with a pair of red shoes that you tried on when you were very small. And if you could tell us a bit about that story, and whether or not that was the moment when you really, really did connect with clothes, and actually kind of maybe that's where your journey started.
Yeah, it starts off with red shoes, those start right sandals that probably many people either putting their kids in or wore themselves. And I used to go to Harrods as a sort of rather privileged London child to have my start right shoes measured, because we all used to have, I think still children do have their shoes measured. Anyway, there was always a terrible moment where the person kneeling with a tape measure would sort of look up at my mum and say, "I'm afraid, madam, she's a double E." And it was, as I say in the book, that word afraid that made me realize that there was something the matter with being a double E. It wasn't something one should necessarily aspire to. And I sort of realized that actually that was one of the first things that gave me thoughts about body image, and the fact that my feet were too wide to be sort of glamorous in a way. And as I was writing that, I realized that's what I wanted the chapters to do. I wanted to kind of excavate my experience and memories and other things that I'd heard or learned, to see what those kind of trigger points were.
So were you always interested in clothes as a young child?
I think I was. I mean, most of us have memories, don't we, of our childhood, you know, party dresses and things like that. I think I was very aware of, yeah, I don't know that I was any more keen on clothes than a lot of children are. I think children actually have quite a determined and opinionated sense of how they want to present themselves, actually.
Mm. The book starts, Alexandra, with an audit of your wardrobe. In another version of my life, I would audit my wardrobe too, but sadly it's never really happened. 22 coats, 35 dresses, 5, it does go on, 3 swimming, it's a very, very, very careful audit. The 37 handbags I need to talk to you about later on, because I've got nowhere near that, and what can you do with 37 handbags? We'll discuss that later. But have you always been very good at kind of keeping track of what you've got, and are you always very good at kind of planning? Because that's something I just wish that I'd been able to do, and it's just always a bit chaotic in my wardrobe.
No, absolutely not. And many of my colleagues on Vogue, particularly those in the fashion room, I mean, they treated their clothes like museum collections. I mean, they have storage spaces out on the A4. You know, with all of their clothes in plastic bags and every, you know, Prada, spring, summer, 2005, all in there. I mean, and I was like a complete scarecrow in terms of my organization of clothes compared to a lot of people in the industry. And I constantly gave away my clothes as well, because we didn't actually have a huge amount of space. I mean, that, whatever it is, 556 or 29 or whatever number sounds like an enormous amount of clothes, but actually it's kind of 2 double fitted wardrobes. You know, it's not that many clothes for 25 years.
So would you say then you're quite ruthless about clothes? You don't hold on to them for sentimental reasons, or hoping that one day you might lose a couple of pounds and fit into something that might be a bit tight?
Oh my God, I've definitely got that. I've got one skirt by Alberta Ferretti. It's a satin skirt, silk skirt, absolute beautiful flower print, which I have never been able to wear. I mean, God knows why I bought it. I must have sort of, you know, had a tiny bit where I thought, oh, you know, no pasta for a night and then I'll be able to get into it. Never been able to wear it, and it's still sitting there, and it's got to be over 20 years old. I mean, I've got a lot of those. But those are the ones I want to keep, because I'm still, you know, I've got to get into that skirt one day.
It's a little bit like books then, because books mark a journey through life, and I feel that by a few key pieces it does bring back a lot of memories, doesn't it? Oh yes, that day when I wore that outfit or those shoes, or it does bring a lot of kind of emotion. Definitely.
Clothes are just filled with memory. Everybody's clothes are filled with memory, and that's what I wanted to try and trigger in people who read the book, that feeling of looking at their own clothes and seeing how many stories they tell them. And it's only when you start thinking about it often that actually all those memories come back. They're not necessarily automatic triggered.
Absolutely. So during your time at Vogue then, was there a huge amount of pressure to look a certain way? If you think about Devil Wears Prada and Meryl Streep, was that your life really? Did you have to kind of present this air of expensive style, or could you kind of dress down a little bit more on a day-to-day basis?
I think there was a feeling that, like any sort of big job, you've got to kind of dress appropriately, and appropriate for an editor of Vogue does show a degree of interest in what fashion is, and kind of knowing, you know, what's kind of on trend now or not. And I certainly never, in fact, it was one of the things I most missed when I got that job, was the feeling that I couldn't just go in there in a pair of jeans and, you know, an old V-neck sweater for the day. I mean, I would never do that. I wasn't kind of dressed in Chanel suits every day, but I did have a feeling that I had to look like somebody who was kind of there in a professional capacity and was kind of doing a serious job, even if it was just in a nice frock.
You speak very openly about your interview, where you were asked how much you spend on clothes a year, and you kind of winged it, didn't you, and said it was £4,000, and then were given a nice clothing allowance to match that. But I wonder whether or not that's because you were a woman, or whether or not that would have happened anyway if you were a man.
Oh, what a good question. And you know, I never thought that. I'm sure it wouldn't have happened if I was a man. And also in the book, I write that £4,000 was regarded as so small an amount that actually the person who asked it at that point wondered whether he had hired the right person for the job. And it was also 3 times probably the amount that I did spend on clothes in 1992. Not quite sure what it would be now. No, I don't think a man would have been asked that. No, I'm not even sure whether anyone would be asked that now.
Yes, you're probably right. It wouldn't be allowed, but probably also people wouldn't be referring to the size clothes that you were wearing, which you also had to endure. And having been in the media myself for a number of years, it is very personal, and people do make comments. Again, I think the atmosphere, the tide has changed now. But at one point, you mentioned about that they'd noted that you were a size 14, and did that matter? Did it matter to you that people not maybe judged, but that they noted how you looked physically, your size?
Yes, I think it did matter to me. It didn't upset me. It kind of intrigued me and slightly frustrated me, because I thought, well, it's totally irrelevant. And also this kind of idea that if you're a size 14, which, let's face it, is not, gigantic, that was something to remark upon because of the job I did. Whereas, if you're a size 14 and you're, a FTSE 100 leader, nobody's remarking upon it. So, where is that strange kind of criteria coming from? I don't admire that, wasn't pleased about it. But I'm pretty robust about people making comments about how I look. I mean, I kind of know it comes with the territory. I think if you're out there in the public eye, people are going to talk about it, and you might not like it, and ideally you don't read it.
Absolutely.
Oh, unless they say something incredibly nice about you, and then you
and then you read it, and then you frame it. Compared to your American counterpart, Anna Wintour, it seems that you haven't kind of embraced the kind of publicity that went with that role. I've never met her, so that might be a really unfair thing for me to say, but it seemed that you didn't kind of put yourself on the front row of everything, and that actually you did your job diligently and quietly without having to have a lot of attention.
I don't think that's entirely true, actually. I mean, that kind of front row thing that's just a seat that comes with the territory. And I did write a book when I was still at Vogue, about Vogue, and I'm writing another book now. So I think I couldn't portray myself as a kind of shrinking violet. I think Anna attracts more publicity and more attention, really.
And what was your relationship like with her?
Well, we'd known each other for a long time, because I was editing GQ when she... I was somewhere within Condé Nast while she was editing British Vogue. And I met her at that point. And oddly enough, her father was the editor of the Evening Standard when my father was the theatre critic of the Evening Standard. So although we never met then, there was a little bit of a kind of family background. And then we have friends in common. So we've known each other, but we're not friends. We're, I would say, colleagues. But I have to say, Anna was incredibly nice when I said I was leaving Vogue, and I got one of the nicest emails from her the day that my successor was announced, saying, I'm sure this is a difficult day for you, because of course, although you leave, somehow the day somebody else actually gets your job is, it's a different matter.
You've chosen some beautiful photographs throughout the book to illustrate many of the stories that you tell, including when you left and the fact that you were on the front page of Vogue.
Oh, my cover picture.
That's not bad.
Yeah, my leaving cards in magazines and newspapers. I don't know if it's true in television. They always give you a cover. And I had a wonderful, highly retouched Mario Testino photograph. Jewels.
But there are some really, really special photographs throughout the book, so that definitely adds to the content. Let's talk about, you know, the kind of style in which you write. It's very honest and quite self-deprecating in many ways, which kind of reveals a layer of yourself that maybe hasn't been on display before. Was that a conscious decision that you made?
When I started writing the book, I sort of found the voice for it. I didn't know before I wrote it what it was going to be like, but I knew I wanted it to be a book that was a kind of emotional and honest book. I mean, originally, my publishers wanted me to write a book about ageless style. That was the sort of almost the very, very starting point. And being asked to write that book at that point made me realize I really didn't want to write something like that. So I sort of almost did the kind of flip opposite, which was to write a book that really was about feelings more than about style. And I think if you start writing about, you know, real life and feelings, you do, well, it works better if you're honest, really, to be honest.
Absolutely, and of course you are. But then once everything is down in black and white, you then have to almost give birth to it, don't you, and release it. And how did that feel? Because that must be quite a hard thing to do. There's nothing you can do to change it.
Every book is nerve-wracking in that way, because, you know, you suddenly look at this thing and you think, hold on a moment, I could have done it completely different, you know. But you've just got to not think that way. And actually there's nothing in the book that I regret writing. And you know, went through, I worked with my publishers on it a lot, and my partner David read it and my son read it, and, you know, I took advice about things that I was putting in or not putting in. And, you know, there were maybe a couple of things I sort of now think, oh, that might have been interesting to talk more about. You know, money, I think, could have been an interesting thing to talk more about. Division of labour at home, I would have probably liked to have talked more about, particularly now as we're sitting here in lockdown, and who does what has become a very, very compelling subject inside the house. But on the whole, I'm quite pleased with what emerged.
So if there was a subject or a chapter on money, what would you have written about that you didn't?
I think how much money motivates you would be something. I mean, it wouldn't have been a chapter about money, but that could have gone into something. I think I do refer to it in the trench coat, actually, where I sort of say that trench coats I always thought were for people who were business people. And I'd never been a business person, but if I had been a business person, I probably would have earned a great deal more money. And I think, you know, that might have been an interesting thing to explore, the decisions one makes about whether or not you want to earn money or not money, and particularly for women, you know, whether they're going to, you know, build a career to earn more money, or whether they feel that that should take a lower rung in importance if, say, they're going to bring up children. I could have written a lot about that.
Absolutely, it's a book on its own, isn't it? And well, when you talk about the trench coat, you got a lot of wear out of your trench coat, didn't you? It was a very interesting part of the book. But let's just finish off that discussion then. So does money motivate you?
Yes, very much so. Money's always motivated me. Yeah, absolutely. From my mum, who's 93 and still alive and remembers everything, has always said that, you know, I've been driven by money practically from when I was born. However, had I been really, really motivated by money purely, then presumably I would have gone into a job where I could have earned, you know, millions of pounds instead of a perfectly respectably paid job, you know, and by most people's standards, an extremely well paid job, but still not something that's, you know, bought me several homes and, you know, a large savings account. But yes, and at Vogue, I think there were moments when I thought I would leave or wanted to leave. One of them particularly when my son was about 7 or 8 and I really felt he'd begun to miss me more not being there. And I thought about leaving, but you know, it was the money that made me stay. Well, I was a kind of single parent, so I'm not quite sure where the money would have come from if I'd
Absolutely.
left.
There is a need, isn't there, to pay for things. So thank you for being so honest about that answer. One of the themes that runs beautifully through the book is colour, and how colour sets your mood. I was very happy to read that you love pink, because pink is my motivation. But there are other themes of other colours that matter to you, black and navy, and perhaps you could share a little bit more about what colour means to you.
Yeah, I think that colour says so much to us, doesn't it? You know, you get an automatic reaction from a colour. So actually, I find that, I don't know why I didn't write about green, because I'm wearing green today and I often wear green, and I don't know why that didn't come into the book. But pink, I really enjoyed writing about, because I think, you know, pink has, well, I say it's got more lives than a cat, but actually it's, you know, it's got more personas than a cat, certainly, because you know, people think that it's kind of lightweight and feminine and girly and not serious, but actually, because of that, pink is a wonderful disguise if you want to actually really cut to the chase and get something done. People, you know, you walk in wearing a nice sort of soft pink looking thing. No one's quite prepared for you being, you know, a real deal driver. So I love pink. And navy, which is, you know, often thought of as a really dull colour. But I realised, and I didn't realise it until I wrote it, that actually it's a very safe colour, navy. You know, you feel safe in navy because it's not, black's quite austere and it's a bit kind of sharp and hard, whereas navy is something that doesn't draw too much attention to you, but it kind of envelops you in a way. So it's that kind of thing.
And black?
Black is, I think, really interesting. I quote the wonderful Nora Ephron in the book, who, you know, writes a lot about black and how everybody can wear black. But actually, I think black can be quite demanding, particularly as you get older. You know, I think black velvet's great, but I think black is it's quite hard against the skin. And one of the things that really interests me about black is in the British countryside, you hardly ever see anyone wearing black. In Italy, you do. You see those, you know, the widows all in the local towns. But actually, outside of London, black is worn far less once you get into the rural countryside. And so I enjoyed. So I looked at the different metropolitan blacks. You know, the Paris black, the New York black, the London black, and they're all different.
It's fascinating, actually, hearing you talk about it and how you light up. All the old tricks are still there, aren't they? And let's talk about trends then. Very difficult to ignore trends that come and go, and it's all very well relying on staple pieces in your wardrobe and what actually suits your personal style, but trends definitely influence the way that we dress. And with this fast fashion and how fashion has become so affordable these days, I would love to hear a bit about what you think of disposable fashion and the whole kind of sustainability piece that we are increasingly and rightly so aware of these days.
Well, there's definitely in the last 2 years, I would say, been, you know, a massive sea change in the general public's attitudes to sustainability and sort of environmental concerns and ethical concerns around fashion, and ditto, you know, the business itself, which is really, I think, you know, held its hand up and said, you know, we have been polluters. And I think many people, myself definitely one of them, if you told me 5 years ago about the stats of what happens in cotton production or cashmere, I would have had no idea about that. And everybody's looking at ways to do something about that. I have to say that I think this period that we're going through, which has put, you know, will put enormous pressure on fashion businesses as people don't buy clothes and aren't able to go out and try, and may well for some time not be able to go out and try clothes on. I think it's going to be very hard for some of the smaller brands who were putting in sort of new initiatives that were quite expensive and quite labor intensive. It's going to be hard for them to do that when they're just battling for survival. So I have in all honesty, a feeling that there's going to be a bit of a setback on that for, maybe a year, and the kind of fast tracking that was going on will just be very difficult when people are just trying to keep their business floating. So that's, the sustainability. I mean, in terms of fast fashion, I have to say that, people are very condemning about it, but the truth of the matter is not everyone's got a lot of money. And I think it's kind of great that somebody can go into Primark and buy something that really cheers them up and makes them feel good and, makes them feel that they're on trend. That's great. The problem is if they're going in there and they're just binning it, the next week and buying another one. So I think having fast, affordable fashion is good. It's a question of how the consumer consumes it as well as how it's produced.
Alexandra, unsurprisingly, our wonderful audience has started to send in some fascinating questions that are far better than mine, clearly. So I'm just going to try and get through as many of them as I can. And actually, the first question picks up on what you've just talked about, and it's how you feel the fashion industry might change because of COVID. Is it going to become more virtual than reality, says Anne, or do you think it will go pretty much back to normal once COVID-19 is under control?
Well, I'm assuming that Anne means things like fashion shows and
Absolutely.
fashion shows. And certainly, I think the signs are that this year it's going to have to be virtual or digital. I mean, I cannot see a way that the shows in the form that I used to go to them with, 800 people in a huge venue, all hugger-mugger together, are going to be happening in the autumn. So people are going to have to find different ways to show their collections. That is, if they've been able to produce collections, I have to say, because, for a lot of people, that's going to be impossible. So COVID's definitely, I would think, for this year, going to probably have a lot of effect on what we actually see in the stores. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if a certain amount of the stock that had been delivered for spring isn't still in there come autumn, obviously not sort of the things that are totally inappropriate, but a lot of people have a lot of stock hanging around and they're going to want to sell it if they possibly can.
Absolutely. I should think there'll be some quite special sales at some point. Another question that's literally just come in, which is, again, on the back of what we've just been discussing. What are your thoughts on the resilience shown by some brands, where we're seeing the likes of Barbour producing hospital gowns, Louis Vuitton manufacturing hand sanitizer? Is this a gimmick, do you think, or a genuine contribution to a worldwide crisis? And I think that's an absolutely brilliant question.
Yeah, I mean, I read the phrase COVID wash for the first time the other day. And, we all know about sort of greenwashing that's going on with everyone trying to do good ecological things that makes them look good when they're not really serious about it. And I'm sure there's a little bit of COVID washing going on somewhere, but not, I think, by those people, not by the people who are, I mean, I think it's amazing what LVMH have done in terms of not just hand sanitizers, but they're doing, PPE as well. I think Barbour is fantastic. There are little designers also certainly in the UK, and I'm sure elsewhere, who are, putting together scrubs, or trying to. Anya Hindmarch did a whole fantastic initiative. I think it was 3,000 gowns for the Marsden, actually, because for cancer treatment, because, everything is going towards for the COVID treatment, but then you've still got people who need to be treated for other things. So no, I don't think it's, I mean, obviously they're not going to carry on producing hand sanitizer forever. As soon as they can, they're going to, LVMH will want to be producing Miss Dior. But, while it's necessary, I'm sure everyone's going to do what they can to help.
Absolutely. And I think that's been one of the positives, hasn't it? In all the sadness and all the stress and all the anxiety, there's been huge amounts of altruism on display, and those companies definitely highlight that. Talking about COVID wash, linking with washing, another question that's come in, which I also love, and I need to ask this myself. This is from Gigi, the obvious one. What do you do with your hair in these non-hairdresser times? I have to say, Alexandra, we went into lockdown, I was just like, oh my gosh, we're 3 weeks away from everyone knowing what my natural colour is, which is quite grey. So
Total nightmare.
no dying. I know it's not been great, has it? Don't look too closely with me.
Well, no, this is very bad. So today, because we were doing this, I suddenly thought, you know, I mean, I'm now, what, 5 weeks from the last colour, which I got in right under the wire. And I haven't actually done a proper kind of home dye, so everything's not looking great. So I thought, hang on a moment, you're going to be on screen. So I've been madly painting Josh Wood brushes all over.
Oh, I've got my Josh Wood very close by. Yeah,
I now look like as if I've been on the rain. I realise, because it's all kind of dried in a strange way. So this is a serious problem for some of us. And I even I think my son's agreed to try and help me with, you know, do a real kind of colour thing, because it's the back I'm worried about. No, it's terrible. That's before we start talking about the cut.
Yes, I know. Listen, it's kind of comforting to know that even you are struggling, because yes, I'm definitely not looking our best. But there you are.
I wish I was blonde, though. Don't you think it's unfair? If you're blonde, it's much easier.
Absolutely. Well, yes. If you're a peroxide blonde, then it's not great, is it? Because then you get very dark roots. So anyway, listen, we could have a whole webinar just on hair colour, and perhaps we should do that one day. It would probably get a lot of people joining in, because we're all so vain.
I was just going to interrupt there, Natasha, and just say it is one of the things we are trying to organise at the moment. So watch this space. You may well see it coming up.
Great.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, the two of us are definitely there.
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, back to the questions that have come in, Alexandra. They are flooding in, which is lovely. And this is quite a meaty one, and I wonder what you think about this. Was Naomi Campbell right to suggest that Vogue had a diversity problem? And that's from Jenna. Jenna, thank you very much for adding that into the discussion.
Yes, so that referred to a photograph that was in my last issue of the magazine. That was a photograph that was taken at the last minute of my staff that were in the office on the day, and everyone went up. It was for a kind of a memory photograph for me. We all went onto the roof, and Mike, who was our picture editor, took a photograph of us all. I mean, if it had been organised in advance, I suspect some of us might have dressed up a bit more, but it was a snap. And when I got it, I thought, oh, what would be really nice would be to put this in my last issue. And so I published it in my last issue, and lo and behold, you know, within, I don't know, moments, there was a Instagram or something from Naomi sort of saying, calling out the picture for not having any ethnically diverse faces. Well, actually, she couldn't really see who was in that picture at that time, but it led to you know, a very unpleasant sort of ongoing rumbling about the diversity of my staff, and I think it was unfair on them. I had a lot of different ethnicities over 25 years I was there, and a lot of mixed race people that were working, and I think it's unfortunate, and it was a surprise to me, because I never had any idea that Naomi, who I'd worked with a lot, felt that way.
And did that change things?
In what way?
Well, did you consciously try to put more ethnically diverse faces?
No, that happened right when I was leaving. That happened, actually. It was once I'd left that happened. So
there are lots of hot topics, aren't there? And I guess in a position like yours, you had to be on the front foot constantly in response to them.
Yes, and I think, you know, the question of sort of racial diversity is a really interesting one in the media, and that was not something new. I mean, that had definitely been talked about while I was there. And actually, I'm relatively proud of my track record of who we included in the magazine, and the amount of sort of BAME women who were artists, writers, professionals, and actors, singers that we had. It's perfectly true that we probably had slightly fewer covers than I would do if I were editing that magazine now. And I'm very pleased to see that things have changed.
Do you regret publishing anything whilst you were editor?
Oh, there may have been a couple of fashion shoots that I regret publishing, simply because in retrospect, I maybe thought that they were a bit ugly, and I published them because I didn't really have the budget to kill them, or I didn't want to offend somebody. But apart from that, no, I don't think so.
And actually that feeds very nicely into a question that Ali has sent in. When did a trend last surprise you? Because again, are you setting the trends or are you responding to them? But what trend surprised you?
Well, the thing about trends is they're created by a sort of strange, unknown kind of consensus of people. It's a bit like the sort of SAGE committee. We don't quite know who they are, but it's a mixture of fashion press, fabricators, retailers, and so you go to the shows and you would see certain things that clearly were trends for that season. It could be a colour, suddenly everyone's doing green, or everyone would be doing a longer length, or an asymmetric hem. And I've never quite known exactly how it was that happened, that this kind of mindset everyone shared. But it by the time we were doing them in the magazine, they weren't surprising in any way, because I'd seen that was the information out there. If you're a magazine editor, what you can do is you can choose which one you want to give sort of greater emphasis to. I'm trying to think which ones I was surprised by. I can't think of surprises, but I can think of where I made mistakes, which was sort of early on in my time there. I was a huge backer of flares back in about 1993 or something. There were a whole load of them on the catwalk, and I'd always loved flares. So I sort of put them everywhere in the magazine, and they completely tanked in the shops. Nobody wanted to wear them. And then about 8 years later, I did it again with the midi skirt. Again, I put midi skirts everywhere because I've always liked midis. And again, at that point, nobody wanted to wear midis. In fact, everyone was heading towards kind of bodycon minis. So, I know my mistakes.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Listen, I'm aware of the time and I've still got so many questions I want to ask you. So just very quickly, as we edge out of time, it's a question that I always get asked, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I'm asking you this same question, but nevertheless, I'm sure you've got wonderful answers. Who you've met in your time that's had a really lasting impression on you, that really, that you can share a couple of stories about. You must have met such extraordinary, amazing people. But maybe one particular woman.
I was very impressed by Michelle Obama when I met her. I write about it a little bit in the book, but I thought that her amazing kind of command of a room. I mean, when I met her, she hadn't really been the first lady for very long. And she was in a group of, I can't remember how many, it was a G20, so there was probably about 19 other first ladies, most of whom had been in their positions for a great deal longer. And she was, she really was such a kind of queen, and so sort of confident and unthreatening, a kind of combination of powerful and unthreatening, which is a very difficult thing to be. Talking of which, actually, the Queen, I am pretty impressed by. I mean, I haven't sort of had one-to-one, sadly.
Yet.
But I met her a couple of times, 2 or 3 times, briefly. And I just think she's really amazing. I mean, she is so kind of on the ball, and she's got that ability to make you feel that she is paying attention to what you're saying, even if you're in a lineup, that she's shaking hands. And she's got the most incredible skin, unbelievably good skin.
Absolutely extraordinary, an amazing woman, absolutely. So the last couple of questions. Any particular item of clothing that you're looking forward to putting on after lockdown?
I definitely going to look forward to putting on a pair of high heels. I mean, I can't really totter around in high heels in the house. It's kind of crazy, or around the park. But I am looking forward, because they kind of do something to you, don't they? You know, a pair of heels. And I'm worried about too much time spent in flats at the moment.
Yes. The white high heels that you write about, or just any
White
pair?
high heels, yeah, I've got 3 pairs of them in the cupboard.
Okay, all right. So the white high heels are out, and I've just got to talk to you about the 35 handbags. I'm jealous. And what do you do with 35 handbags? And have you a favourite?
35 handbags, and only really one that I use. Well, I always kept the handbags, because I thought, when I no longer have Vogue, because that is one thing I was given, were handbags. I was not given a lot of clothes, but I was given tons of handbags. So I always kept a lot of the handbags, because I thought, you know, you will be able to use these for the rest of your life. You are never going to need to buy another handbag. But one of the interesting things I found about coronavirus is I had not carried a handbag practically since it started, because I'm only going around the corner to the post office and I can put everything in my pocket. And so that handbag, which is still the one I use most of the time, is just sat by my bed now for 4 weeks.
Yes, actually, you're absolutely right. Mine is slightly abandoned underneath my desk. So yes, I think that's a very common theme. Last question, and let's end on something vaguely serious, which is about you and what your plans are next, the next chapter in your life. I have a feeling there might be another book coming out.
Well, I'm very much hoping to get cracking on another book. I just haven't put what it is yet. But I'm pleased that this book's doing well, and so it's given me the confidence to, you know, to really start thinking about that. I'm working on a television drama series, which I've been working on with a colleague of mine called Fiona Golfer, since when we both left Vogue, actually. So it's in, you know, very early stage of production, but actually we just got an email yesterday saying that, you know, we're getting ready for a kind of pilot script. So that's very exciting. Maybe doing a bit of work in the retail sector, which I'd like to do and haven't done very much of. So, and hopefully carry on writing more journalism, because I do really like doing that.
Well, I'm sure we will all devour everything that you write. And may I thoroughly recommend this book, because I just loved reading it. It's been the highlight of my lockdown, if I'm honest, as has this interview. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been the biggest pleasure. And I hope one day when this is all over that I get to meet you in person. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's joined us.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha, and everyone out there who's listening. And, you know, I wish we could have answered even more questions. They're always so fascinating to see what people want to know about, and thank you. And also, you know, definitely it's more important that you donate to well-being of women than it is that you buy the book in those links,
or both. Or both.
I would definitely say both. Ladies, thank you so much. That was just brilliant. I've had some lovely messages from some of our supporters saying that they have it's just been a great highlight of their day. It's a great way to move into the weekend. Natasha, they think you've asked some fantastic questions, so you've obviously done amazing research. Alexandra, you've been totally honest. You were honest in the book. It's always a pleasure working with both of you, and to have your support. Thank you so much. Thank you for plugging the charity at the end there. Please do donate. All the details for Wellbeing of Women are either on the chat section here or on our website, and the same for Alexandra's books. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Alexandra and Natasha. What a lovely, lovely Zoom event. And goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.